Hello, how are you? I want you to know that grace have sent you to this video. God's grace. I want you to know that you have never gone too far. You have never gone too deep. That God cannot reach you. That his grace cannot reach you. It was destined that you have made it to this channel. It was destiny calling. God's grace is powerful. God's grace is sufficient. God said he is calling you. He is calling you. He is calling you. He is calling your name. He is calling your name. He is calling you out of that pit. He is calling you out of that situation. God's grace is enough. God said he is pulling you out. God says his grace is enough. God's grace can save you. God's grace can cover you. God's grace is enough. His grace is enough. God said you no longer have to sit in shame. God says you no longer have to feel like you're not enough. You no longer have to feel unloved because God's grace covers you. God's grace covers you. God's grace covers you. God wants you to know that his grace is sufficient for you. That his grace is pulling you out. It is pulling you out. It is pulling you out. It is pulling you out. And it is setting you in a place where you will know that you are loved. Where you will know that you are loved. God said you are loved. You are not those things that they said you are. God said you are what he says you are. And you are loved. You are fearfully and wonderfully made. God says you are purpose. God says you are purpose. God says you are more than a conqueror. God says you are the apple of his eye. God says he fights for you. God said he fights for you. God says you're not going to drown. You're not going to fail. God says his grace is enough. It is sufficient. It is sufficient. And God said his grace is pulling you out. His grace is pulling you out. The power of his love is pulling you out. It is pulling you out. It is pulling you out. God says he's cleaning you up. He is cleaning you up. God says he is cleaning you up. He is cleaning you up. God said his grace is sufficient. His grace is sufficient. His grace is sufficient. His grace can do what no one else can do in your life. His grace can do what no one else can do in your life. What no one else can do in your life. God says you are capable of love. You are capable of love. God says you are capable of love. God said he's going to turn that sorrow into joy. God says he's going to turn your sorrow into joy. My. His grace is sufficient. It is all powerful. It is all powerful. It is all powerful. All powerful. And it will never fail you. It will never fail you. It will never fall short in your life. It will never fall short in your life. It will never fall short in your life. It was God's grace that brought you to this video. Because God needed to say some things to you. God said he's turning it around. He's turning it around. He's turning it around. God's grace is sufficient in your life. His grace is enough.